Hello, welcome to It's All Happening. My name is Isaac and I am your host. Today we're going to be covering off on how to hustle your way into any opportunity that you want. In this episode, I'm going to be covering some personal stories of my own triumphs where I have wanted something, I've gone after it, hustled my way into it, and ended up landing it. And so these stories range all the way from when I was 15 years old until recent stories. So I hope you get a lot of value. I'm going to have takeaways and action items at the end, so make sure you stick around for that. Last week, I covered off on how to make decisions in your 20s. Well, if you listen to that episode and you've decided what you want in your 20s, this is a great way to go after those opportunities that you want in life. Tried and tested by me. My first story comes from when I wanted to be a dentist. So this starts when I was 15 years old. I had a real curiosity about becoming a dentist. The only dentist I ever went to was the school dentist that comes in the dental van. If you went to an Australian public school, you would know what I'm talking about. The ladies in there were super lovely and they always made me super excited about going. And to me, they were just chit-chatting to each other and chit-chatting to the kids and asking about your life. I thought it was fantastic. I also, to this day, really love going to the dentist. You feel so clean and you feel like a new person after going. So when I was 15, I decided I wanted to work as a dentist, and I'd wanted this for quite a long time at this point. And I was at the point in high school where I got this idea into my head where I could do a school-based traineeship. And basically, in my mind, I could have this wrapped up by year 12 when, your grades actually matter for university. And so I made a list of all of the dental clinics in my town and rang up every single dental clinic in my town to pitch them the idea of a school-based apprenticeship. Most of them told me they were not hiring, and the ones that were hiring obviously didn't want a 15-year-old, let alone someone who just wanted to come in and do that one day a week traineeship. Yeah, my efforts weren't that fruitful after I'd went through and called every single clinic that was around my town. Now, after this, I actually went online and had a look at the clinics that were actually hiring, and I applied to all of them. But again, they weren't hiring for my job description. They were hiring for someone who was working full-time or someone that could meet their needs a little bit better. When these two paths weren't fruitful, I decided to go into every single dental clinic in my town and hand in resumes. Now, I know this is like a very old school way to get a job. I dressed up in my formal uniform and I walked into every dentist on an afternoon. I think I split it across a few afternoons actually. There ended up being this one dentist that loved my enthusiasm and said I could do 2 weeks of work experience over my holidays. So I worked those 2 weeks instead of going on holidays with my family. I was a bit of a psycho when I was younger and I was really hungry. So these days I'd probably definitely go on a holiday. But I managed to get signed on for the school-based traineeship after the 2 weeks of work experience. But I ended up hating missing school so much that I wrapped it up within a month. At 15, I could have looked online and seen that there was no jobs that I qualified for. I could have just applied, got rejected, and stopped there. And I could have stopped when I was getting no's over the phone or no one was answering. Instead, I kept going. I printed out physical CVs and I went around to all of the dental clinics, giving them elevator pitches on how I should be a school-based trainee. I didn't stop until I got what I wanted. And looking back, at 15, I was quite relentless in what I wanted. And I think this leads me to my first point, and I've used this again and again when I wanted opportunities, but you really need to be relentless. You're going to get told no, and just because you get no's from everyone does not mean you should stop asking. Keep asking and find different ways of getting access to these people and getting in front of these people. Make sure that you have went down every single avenue possible to get a hold of someone or to see them. This really leads me to my favorite analogy that I use for this is that if you had a robber knocking on your front door, demanding that they come in because they want to steal your TV, you're not going to let them in at first. But if they were banging for days on end, eventually you would just let them in and steal your fucking TV. You'd be like, I'm sick of all the banging. Just come in and steal the TV. I don't care anymore. That same analogy does work for getting opportunities. People will listen after you bang on the door relentlessly again and again and again. They're going to either love the enthusiasm, like this one dentist did. They're going to maybe offer you an alternative like the work experience example, and they're going to let you come in and steal their TV. And I think that's something that you should really remember is just be relentless. If you want something, keep going in, keep asking, keep finding different ways. If you've emailed them, call them. If you've called them, turn up at a conference that they're going to be at. If you see that they're a golfer, go to the golf course that they go to. The whole point of this is make sure that you be relentless. Now, my second story is when I first moved to Brisbane, I needed to get a job. In the last story, I touched on how I got into contact with every dentist in Bundaberg, which is the small town that I was from. In this story, I take things to a whole new extreme. This is how I kind of got my first jobs in Brisbane through spraying and praying, and why volume works. When I finished school, I moved to a capital city to study at university, and I had very little to no support financially, so I was gonna have to self-fund myself through my university experience. And the accommodation I chose was not cheap. I made a promise with myself pretty early on that I wasn't gonna miss out on any life experiences because of my financial circumstances, so I decided to live at a residential college, which is expensive and made literally no sense for someone in my financial circumstances at the time, but I just had a gut feeling that it was the right decision. And fast forward, it did end up being the right decision and changed my university experience forever, and I would have never had it any other way. I was 17. So I was getting paid like it. I needed to hustle. I moved to Brisbane 11 days before university started so that I could get a job in Brisbane before I started university and started paying a ridiculous amount in rent to a residential college. I went and stayed with my aunt in the outer suburbs, and I would travel into Brisbane each day and hand out resumes. I went to the local library and I would print off 100 resumes, and then I would go to a different shopping centre / area or suburb in Brisbane, and I would just hand out a ridiculous number of resumes. And I would not stop until I'd handed out all 100 resumes. And I wasn't having much luck with immediate interest. In stores, people weren't really saying that they were hiring. I mean, it was just after people would have taken on Christmas casuals because I moved in January. So I wasn't having a lot of luck in person. But I did this for 10 days straight, which means I handed out 1,000 resumes in total. That's a fucking huge amount of resumes. In the end, I ended up getting 3 jobs, which let me pay my way through university. So the moral of the story is spray and pray works. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't be specific about what you want, because obviously in this case, I wasn't looking for a specific opportunity. I set out to get a job and I didn't really care what it was. This applies even if you are looking for a specific opportunity, like a specific role. I hear so much people saying that they don't have luck, but for fuck's sake, if you've only applied for 50 jobs, you need to shut the fuck up and you need to apply for more jobs. Those are rookie numbers. If you haven't applied to 1,000 jobs, and I'm not saying don't personalize or anything like that, but if you haven't applied for 1,000 jobs, stop complaining. You need to be applying for hundreds, if not 1,000 different positions before you start complaining that there's no opportunities out there. Because really, the only reason you haven't got an opportunity yet is because you're lazy and you've only applied for 50 jobs. I'm sorry to tell it to you. Stop complaining when you haven't done the volume and you haven't sprayed and prayed. So that would be my second takeaway. And I love that story. I felt like such a hustler while I was doing it. Now, my third story is split into 2 because I actually use the same strategy for 2 of the different careers that I wanted. One is like a very professional career, and one is just a super niche job that I wanted when I was 18 years old. The first story is about me wanting something that was niche and targeting a very specific goal. So it was almost the end of my first year of university and I really wanted to work at R.M. Williams. I had saved all the spare money that I had from my job previous to this year when I was still 17. I saved up enough money to buy myself a pair of R.M. Williams, which I think costed me about $450 at the time because I got a discount through the work that I worked at already because it was a shoe store. And I really loved the R.M. Williams brand. And I mean, going to a college at UQ, everyone was wearing R.M. Williams and I was obsessed with these shoes. And I really wanted to work in the stores. They smelled so nice. They had amazing fit outs that were all wooden, and the people in there I had heard got free uniforms. And I was like, well, that's a bit of me. And I was actually only a few days before I was supposed to go home for the summer. I told myself a few days before leaving, if I get a job at R.M. Williams, I'm going to stay over the summer. So I printed out 7 resumes and I handed them out to R.M. Williams stores in Brisbane, to different stores. And 2 days later, I got a call asking me to interview. And when I sat down at that interview for the flagship store, R.M. Williams store, she had 5 of those 7 resumes in her hand. So we both laughed, obviously, at how funny that is, because she obviously knew that I'd handed out 5 different resumes to 5 different stores that were all R.M. Williams. But I think the point of this is eagerness alone can open up opportunities. Now, this leads me on to my second story because these points are very interlinked. But the second was a very specific type of role. I was working at a company and I knew someone at one of our subsidiary companies was doing a very specific role called deal origination and private equity. And it was a research and business development based role rather than a deal management execution role, which is usually what private equity roles entail. Sometimes they include origination in the one role. depends where you work. I thought this was awesome. She got to touch all of the best parts and most interesting parts of the transaction, and none of what I found boring, which was really the transaction execution and modeling and all those types of things that weren't my exact skills. Whereas research and business development were my exact skill set. And so I thought, this is a fucking amazing job and I really want to do it. This market is super narrow. There's only about 20 jobs like this in Australia that exist in general, and none were listed online. So I started talking to everyone in the industry. I reached out to every single person basically who was in the industry. After chatting to everyone in the industry, I actually managed to uncover some roles, and I was in progress chats with all of them, and I had final interviews at 2 different firms. One through a recruiter who I'd told I was very interested in this really specific role and if there was anything to come up to get in contact with me. And one was really a firm that was looking for someone like me, but didn't know they knew that this role existed, but usually this role is filled by someone who is quite senior and has a lot of connections already. They couldn't afford the budget that exercise would require to meet these business requirements. And so I had final interviews with both of those players. While this was happening, a firm listed a junior position in this role, which is rare because I had talked with so many people doing the exact role. When this role ended up getting posted, I could apply straight away because I knew so many people doing that exact role. I knew how suited I was at the role and exactly what the role entailed. So this put me so ahead when I applied for this job, and I ended up landing it very easily. Now, I prepared so well for those interviews because I had people at other peer firms telling me exactly what to say. They really guided me through the process, and I feel like when I was interviewing for these roles, I was so prepared and I felt so confident going in because I'd done this prior work. I'd learned about the market. I'd learned about all these different positions, and by this point, I had created opportunities. So this opportunity that was already this demand that needed to be filled, because I was already working to create demand, it was so easy for me to fall into this role. The point of this is specificity can be good, especially if you're certain it is for you. For example, I really wanted to work at RM Williams. I was so passionate about it. If I was so specific about what I wanted, and there wasn't that many RM Williams stores in Brisbane that I could have worked at, equally, deal origination was a really niche part of the market where there isn't actually that many jobs that exist. And I think the more specific you are and passionate and more you know about what the role entails, you're going to be far more interesting and attractive as a candidate to a potential employer or someone who wants to give you that opportunity or holds the gates to that opportunity. The main takeaways is specificity is good. Although I did just talk about spraying and praying, you can spray and pray with specificity in mind. Make sure you're passionate about what you're doing, and you're going to find this out by doing the research. Talk to everyone in the market. The more you know about this specific role, the more likely you are to land that role, because if you're this passionate about what the role entails, then they're more likely to just hire you to do that role. So be specific about what you want and why you want it. Don't be afraid to be narrow. Like if there is a really specific role, you can get it. If someone has that role at a certain company, you can get it as well. It's well within your realm and possibility. So don't be afraid to be narrow. And if you're certain about it, find a fucking way in. And the third thing is study the role, study what you're going to be doing, study everything about that firm, what you need to be doing, and be really exact and be really precise. And that is going to make sure that you are miles ahead of everyone else. Okay, we're on to our 5th story, which is about creating opportunities. It was my 2nd year of university and I just come back from COVID and I didn't have an internship. And I really wanted my first internship. And I also wanted to work in a startup. So I found a list of startups in Brisbane, and naturally, given the approach that you would have seen with the others, I decided to reach out to all of them. Now, a COO of one of the high growth startups in Brisbane where I lived at the time told me to come in and we could have a coffee. They said they didn't take interns, but they were happy to chat. So I chatted to him. I told him that everything that I could do, I can analyze data, I can help with anything they want that is data related and decision making related. And I was like, I don't have any experience, but this is what I know how to do. As the conversation had progressed prior to me telling them what my skill set was, he mentioned that they're currently looking at a more comprehensive pricing strategy. I had no idea how to do it, but I was like, well, that can be my project. And he's like, well, we don't have any spare laptops. And I was like, well, I've got a laptop. I can use my own laptop. Do you mind if I've used my own laptop? And he's like, you know what? Okay, but we don't have any money to pay you. And I was like, well, I can work for free. But instead of working full time, I can work part time for free just 2 days a week. And he was like, I'm not sure that's legal, and said no. And I was like, well, actually, my university has insurance that covers employers so that they can work for free. I'll get the form filled out for you. I gave this poor guy absolutely no reason to say no to me, and I had an answer for every objection that he came to me with. I'd made it completely frictionless for him to take me on as an intern and completely de-risked it for him. And I literally created my own opportunity. So I think the moral of this story really is don't wait for jobs to be advertised in your desired role or field. Talk to people, uncover opportunities, pitch your value add to people, and solve a problem that they're existing in their business. Make it so easy for them to hire you or give you the opportunity that you desire. Now, I've used this to get jobs in venture capital and basically every role that I've ever landed. I've used different parts of these stories to land. So now we're going to move on to the exact steps you should take if you want to hustle your way into any opportunity that you want. Step 1, go in with the intention to be relentless. Do not take no for an answer. I don't care how many times you've been told no. People who say no over the phone might say yes when you run into them at a networking event. People might not answer you at a LinkedIn DM, but they might answer an email. People might not hire you when you hit apply, but when you connect with them on LinkedIn, but when you start posting thought leadership, they might reach out to you to work for them. I have seen this work time and time again, but you must be willing to do whatever it takes, even if that is the long game. Be the robber who is banging on the door, asking to steal your TV, and eventually they're going to let you in and steal the TV. 2 is, I don't care what people say, spray and pray works. Even if your conversion is low, pure volume is just going to work. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't tailor your approach. I am saying if you want to work in a very broad industry, don't just limit yourself to 4 companies or stop after 50 reach outs. Like I said before, if someone said, I've applied for 50 jobs, nothing's working, wake the fuck up, they're rookie numbers. I don't want to hear any excuses. 3 is if you have a specific desire, go after it. Even if one person in the world does this job, like I'm talking even if you want to be the fucking Pope. When it comes to opportunities, if someone in the world has it, there is no reason that can't be you and you can't have it too. I don't care how exclusive it is, how narrow the industry is, you can break in. It obviously takes time, the more difficult the opportunity is. Like it took me 10 months to land that private equity job that I was talking about before. However, if you want something super narrow and super specific, you need to be an expert on what that role entails and study it like crazy. You should really have spoken to every single person who works in that industry if it's a super narrow role or it's super exclusive to get. Like if you're given the opportunity to interview, you should be the best candidate by far because you've done a crazy, insane amount of research. You talk to every single person in that industry and you should be the best candidate that there is. Even if you don't have the experience because you just know so much about that role and you know why you would be the best at it. Just being able to show that passion, you're rarely going to get rejected when you've done all of those elements and put it in place. And my 4th takeaway is create your own opportunity. Not every role is going to be listed. Not every role will be conceptualized into a role. If you need, create the role yourself. Put yourself in a place for luck to strike you by talking to people in your industry or the role you want to work in. Maybe it's a role that doesn't even exist yet. Create it. As long as you're solving a problem or adding value in the world, there is a place for you to create an opportunity for yourself. So, be relentless, spray and pray, be brave enough to go after your specific goal, and if an opportunity doesn't exist, create it yourself. Thank you for joining me on another episode of It's All Happening. Tune in every Tuesday where we explore all the different things that you could possibly want out of your life, and we talk to the people who have been there and done that so that it can all happen. Now, we have some really exciting episodes coming up. I have my friend Phoebe on to give you a complete guide on moving to London as an Aussie. And I also have my friend Nee, who has created a fintech company in Hanoi in Vietnam. And she's going to be talking about founding a company in her mid-20s. So stay tuned and keep your eye out for those episodes that are coming up. I'm so excited about those conversations and to share them with you. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week.